Before starting severe disease, one thing I want to make you clear that the guideline provided by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare is only indicative. Management of severe disease require a well-trained team. First of all, we'll discuss about the case definition or the case spectrum of severe disease described in the guideline. So patient may present with a severe pneumonia, and we are going to focus about the adult and adolescent patient only. So the severe anemia is identified by the patient who are having clinical signs of pneumonia along with the at least one of the three features. His or her respiratory rate should be more than 30 breaths per minute. He should be having severe respiratory distress, that is breathlessness. Apart from that, his or her partial pressure of oxygen, that is SpO2, should be less than 90% on the room air. Second group of patients are one who are having acute respiratory distress syndrome. In short, it is known as ARDS. It is defined as few criterias. First is onset. So the onset or the worsening of the respiratory symptoms should be within 1 week of the known clinical insult. Means most of the severe diseases in COVID-19 are going to be developed at end of 1 week. So the patient diagnosed or having symptoms of COVID on day 1 is going to land up into the acute respiratory syndrome at end of the first week. Chest imaging on chest X-ray or ultrasound of chest should show bilateral opacities which is not fully explained by the effusion or lobar pneumonia or lung collapse or any nodule. So it is mandatory to have bilateral opacity, and in COVID we are seeing lower prominence of the bilateral opacities. Apart from that, the origin of pulmonary infiltrate should be from the non-cardiac region. Means the respiratory failure is not fully explained by the cardiac failure or fluid overload. And an objective way to assess the cardiac function may be echocardiography to rule out the cardiogenic cause of pulmonary edema. And the next thing is oxygenation impairment in these adults, and on the basis of this PaO2 upon FiO2 ratio, this ARDS can be divided into the three parts, that is mild ARDS, moderate ARDS and severe ARDS. So in mild ARDS, patient is having PaO2 upon FiO2 between 200 to 300 millimeter of mercury, while in moderate cases it is 100 and between 100 and 200 millimeters of mercury, and for the severe disease it is less than 100 millimeter of mercury at PEEP more than 5 centimeters of water. But many cases this, when PaO2 is not available, then SpO2 upon FiO2 ratio can be used to suspect the patient with the ARDS. So if this SpO2 upon FiO2 ratio is less than 315, then it suggests the patient may have ARDS. Third group of patients are having sepsis. This is how guideline defines it. It is an acute life-threatening organ dysfunction which is caused by dysregulated host response to suspected or proven infection. The signs of organ dysfunction may include the following. First is altered mental status, that is patient may be confused or may having unconsciousness. He or she may complain of difficulty in breathing or fast breathing, that is tachypnea. His or her oxygen saturation may be low. There may be reduced urine output indicating acute kidney injury. There may be tachycardia due to different causes. There may be features of shock like low blood pressure, weak pulse, cold and calming extremity. Skin mottling may be present, or laboratory features of coagulopathy, thrombocytopenia, that is decreased platelet count, acidosis, high level of lactate and bilirubin level rise may indicate organ dysfunction. Next group of patients who are very sick are classified as septic shock patient. Guideline defines septic shock as persisting hypotension despite of volume resuscitation, and it requires vasopressor agent in the form of dopamine or noradrenaline to maintain the mean arterial pressure of more than 65 mm of mercury, and patient is having serum lactate level more than 2 millimole per liter. So, how to treat these patients? So, the first group of some interventions known as early supportive therapy, and monitoring is very important in these severe patients. They require symptomatic treatment with paracetamol for the pain and fever, antitussive for the cough, and they require immediate oxygen supplementation. This oxygen supplementation should start at 5 liters per minute. Then the flow of oxygen should be titrated to achieve a target of SpO2 of more than 90% in non-pregnant adult, while the target of SpO2 is slightly more in pregnant females. So it is more than 92 to 96% in the pregnant females. These are the severe cases. So fluid management in these patients is conservative if there is no shock, but in case of shock the bolus can be given. So fluid management is something very important in these patients. Anticoagulation, in moderate cases we have been using enoxaparin of 40 mg of OD subcutaneous, but in severe cases it is given in the double dose of moderate cases, that is enoxaparin 40 mg of twice daily subcutaneous if there is no any high risk of bleeding. But this anticoagulation is contraindicated in the subset of patients like who are having active bleeding, emergency surgeries, severe thrombocytopenia, and in end stage renal disease unfractioned heparin can be considered in place of low molecular weight heparin, the guideline says. The next is corticosteroid. So corticosteroid is indicated in the patient who are having progressive deterioration in the oxygen indicator, means patient is requiring oxygen requirement is increasing and SpO2 is falling. One who are having the rapid worsening of this radio imaging, that is appearance of the new or worsening of the old opacities in the chest X-ray. One who are having signs of generalized inflammation like serum ferritin is high or CRP is positive. These are the patients in whom corticosteroid is useful. The doses of corticosteroids in the severe cases is the methylprednisolone should be used in 1 to 2 mg per kilogram of body weight, or dexamethasone can be used in the dose of 0.2 to 0.4 mg per kg, and it can be continued up to 1 week, and after that the continuation of corticosteroids should depend upon the clinician judgment. One thing the guideline highlights is the larger dose of glucocorticoids delay the coronavirus removal from the body due to its immunosuppressive effect. So we are also very much supporter of using low doses of steroid, and in less severe cases or moderate cases oral corticosteroid can also be given. This is my personal opinion, but it is not written in the guideline. In guideline it is written only IV steroids. So second group of patients who are having ARDS. So type 1 respiratory failure is something a very feature of severe cases, because most of the patient is having SpO2 of less than 90%. So oxygen supplementation must be given. Patients who are having increasing respiratory distress or hypoxemia, or the patient whose symptoms are not relieving by the standard oxygen therapy, which we started as at 5 liter per minute and then increasing, can be put over the non-invasive ventilation in the form of high flow nasal cannula or high flow nasal cannula oxygenation. But patients who are having severe hypercapnia, who are having hemodynamic instability, one who is having abnormal mental status or multi-organ failure, should not be put on the high flow nasal cannula. The one problem with the use of non-invasive this ventilation in these patients is risk of aerosol generation, but the use of new generation of devices reduces the chances of generation of aerosols. So these can be used in patients who are requiring relatively higher oxygenation. Apart from that, patients who are having COPD or hypercapnic respiratory failure, this high flow nasal cannula usually not a choice, but patients who are having mild hypercapnia or stable hypercapnia can be put over the non-invasive mechanical ventilation. Settings of non-invasive ventilation. So for BiPAP, you should set a pressure support of 5 to 15 centimeter of water, adjusted to a tidal volume of 5 to 7 milliliter per kg at the PEEP of 5 to 10 centimeter of water, and FiO2 given can be from 50% to 100%, and this setting should be titrated to obtain a target SpO2 of more than 94%. So please note, the target is not 100% in any case. So the target in these patients is more than 94%. If there is no improvement between 1 to 2 hours of non-invasive ventilation, then patient should be rapidly decided about the tracheal intubation and putting him or her on the mechanical ventilation. The second option we have is invasive mechanical ventilation. In invasive mechanical ventilation, what we use is known as the lung protective ventilation strategy. Otherwise, it is also known as baby lung concept. It is a well adapted by the ARDS net. Tidal volume should be kept low in these patients in range of 6 ml per kg. Respiratory rate should be kept between 15 to 35 per minute. PEEP should be titrated between 5 to 15 centimeter of water, and PEEP and tidal volume should be adjusted to target a plateau pressure of less than 30 centimeter of water. If plateau pressure exceeds the 30 centimeter of water, then the chances of varotrauma increases in these patients. And by the invasive mechanical ventilation, our oxygenation target is SpO2 of 88 to 95% and PaO2 of 55 to 80% is well accepted. So if patients are refractory to the invasive mechanical ventilation, then these patients can be put on prone ventilation, but the problem with the prone ventilation is that it requires a very much trained, and it is a labor intensive method, and if the team is not very competent or not had been trained in the prone ventilation, then it is more risky than the beneficial. Refractory hypoxemia can be defined as the PaO2 upon FiO2 less than 150 with the fractional inhaled oxygen of 60% with the PEEP of more than 5 centimeter of water. The disconnection of the patient tube from the ventilator. So many of the time during the suction of endotracheal tube, this tube of the patient is detached. So this, if you detach the tube from the patient endotracheal tube, ventilator circuit from the endotracheal tube, it will lead to the loss of PEEP, and this will lead to the collapse of lung, that is atelectasis. So for the suctioning, inline suction should be used, and if you are trying to export the patient or trying to change the patient where disconnection of endotracheal tube is necessary, then the endotracheal tube must be clamped before detaching the circuit. So this is very important thing and it must be taken care of. Early recognition of the septicemic patient is key to manage them, and they should obtain some bundles within 1 hour of recognition. They should obtain a good antibiotic according to the local susceptibility. Fluid loading should be done, and if needed, vasopressor should be started for hypotension within 1 hour of diagnosis of septic shock. How the fluid resuscitation should be done? Patient should receive at least 30 milliliter per kilogram of isotonic crystalloid in first 3 hours. One thing categorically guideline mentions that we should not use hypotonic crystalloid like 5% dextrose or 10% dextrose or starch or gelatins for resuscitation. After the initial bolus, we should determine the need of additional fluid boluses, but it should be based on the clinical response and improvement in the perfusion. After the fluid resuscitation, if needed, patient should be administered with the vasopressor. Noradrenaline should be preferred in COVID patients who are having septic shock over dopamine. If possible, this inotrope should be given from the central line, and if not possible, then it can be given from the peripheral line by use of large bore cannula, plus the area should be closely monitored for any sign of extravasation, because if there is extravasation, then it can lead to the gangrene of fingers. Then what are the perfusion targets while doing fluid resuscitation or administering vasopressor in patients who are having septic shock? It includes the mean arterial pressure of more than 65 millimeter of mercury. A urine output is more than 0.5 ml per kg per hour in adult, while more than 1 ml per kg per hour in children. And there should be improvement in the skin mottling, capillary refill time will improve, level of consciousness will improve, and lactate will decrease if there is a adequate perfusion. According to the guideline, the SCQS should be discouraged in patients who are having severe disease, and it is not recommended for the severe disease. And this is all about the management of COVID-19 severe cases. In next part, we will discuss about the newer therapies which are coming up in the form of remdesivir and other treatments which are under investigation. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.